Good morning. Today is Sunday, the 24th day of the Chodesh Adar, and Adar Sheni, of course, the second Adar. And today we continue chapter 38. We're going to learn actually yesterday's class as well, which was Shabbos that we couldn't record. And being that it's all a continuation, so in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe began that, of course, number one, we're talking about what is important, the doing of the mitzvahs, of the kavana, the intent. And we explained that all of the mitzvahs, the bottom line is to do it. To do it. If you do a mitzvah without kavana, it is considered done. If you just have the intent of the mitzvah, but you don't actually do it, it's not considered done. And of course, with the exception of the first verse of the Shema and the first blessing of the prayer of the Amidah, where in those two cases, you need to have also the intent, you need to have the kavana, otherwise it's not considered done. But other than that, the main thing is the action, and we explained why. And then the Alter Rebbe took a shift and it says, wait a second, but really, we do know that there's something special about the kavana. So that when he quotes what it says from the Shiloh HaKadosh, that mitzvah b'lei kavana, keguf b'lei neshama. A mitzvah without kavana, a mitzvah without the proper intent, is considered just like a body without a soul. So this is a statement said by the Shiloh, and the Alter Rebbe takes it and analyzes it deeply to understand what does it mean. And he explains that the difference between body and soul. And he's talking about, I'm going to say it outside, and then we're going to look inside. This way we'll be able to understand better. And he's talking about the creative powers of God in this world. The creative powers of God in this world, we can divide it into two. One is the quality of the godly energy, and the quantity of godly energy. So he says, as far as the quality of the godly light, all creatures are equally concealed. The godliness is concealed equally from all creatures. That is, that you don't, no matter what type of creature, whether it's an inanimate object, or it's a human being, or an animal, or a plant, in all of them, we do not see the godliness in a revealed way. It's concealed. The godliness is concealed. But when it comes to the quantity of godly energy, how much creative power is invested in each creature, that there is a vast difference between every type of creature. Generally, it is divided to the four creatures, the four categories, which is domem, tzomeach, chai, medaber, the inanimate object that has the least godly creative powers, or the vegetative, the vegetative world, the world of vegetations, things that grow. There you see more creative power, godly energy invested when you see things grow. So he divides it in generally these four categories: the inanimate and the vegetative and animal and human. But he also divides it into two categories. You have the inanimate objects and the vegetative, versus the animal and humans. Because there you have also soul, you have feelings, you have emotions, all kinds of things in the animals and humans, where the inanimate and vegetative, you don't. So he says, so what the Alter Rebbe is leading is that just like you have in this world, the goof, the body and the soul, that the body and the soul both have equally concealment of godliness. Even the soul has also concealment of godliness. Talking about obviously we're not talking about the vivifying soul. We're not talking now about the godly soul. So, but when it comes to the quality is different. The quantity of life, how much creative powers is invested, that is vastly different. The same thing the Alter Rebbe is going to draw the conclusion that similarly, when we're talking about the mitzvahs, the commandments, you have also the body and the soul of the mitzvahs. The body of the mitzvah, by the mitzvahs, what is in common? The quantity of light. And there, what is the opposite of what we have when it comes to the physical creatures. Physical creatures, they're equally concealed. When it comes to commandments and the kavana of commandments, there, the godliness is equally revealed, not concealed. The difference is how much of godliness is revealed. So let's look inside. We're going to start with yesterday's class, the class of Shabbos. Says the Alter Rebbe, true in terms of the concealment of the countenance, meaning the degree to which the countenance, the inner aspect of the divine life force is concealed, the light, meaning the divine creative life force, is the same in both body and soul. It is concealed equally in both. You don't see godliness, not in the body, not in the soul. The garments in which the light hides, conceals and clothes itself are identical in body and soul. And why is that? Because both body and soul are of this world. The word olam, which means this world, it means he'elem, comes from the word he'elem, which means concealment. That means anything that is connected with this world, by definition, is concealed. Godliness is concealed. You cannot see the godliness in this world. Where throughout the world and all its creatures, spiritual as well as physical, the light and life force issuing from the breath of God's mouth are equally concealed. And it says, by the concealment of the countenance, and this concealment goes from level to level. This is by the descent of the life force from level to level by means of numerous powerful tzimtzumim, contractions, through the various levels constituting the chain-like succession of worlds. That we explained in a different opportunity, the chain-like succession of the world, that is one lower and lower, one leads to the other. Finally, clothing itself in the klipas noiga, the shell of noiga, in order to give life to the totality of this material world. So in the higher spiritual worlds, there the godliness, the quality also of godliness is less concealed. But when we're talking about this physical world, body and soul, everything is equally concealed of its godliness. Behainu, which means kol advorim hamutorim hatoirim shebo olam hazeh. This means all the things of this world that are permitted and pure, which receive their vitality directly through the klipas noiga. And through the klipas noiga evolve all impure, forbidden things, which derive their vitality from the three impure klippas. Yet the vitality too stems from noiga. The level of noiga is the source. This is like the bridge between the holy side and the evil side. and the evil side does not obviously have their own source of life. They also need the source of life that come from Hashem. So the klipas noiga, that shell of noiga, is the bridge, and we have the ability to lift it up or to let it go down. And that is the tragedy of this world, where we have this klipas noiga continuing allowing giving to the evil, and our fight is to elevate it, to restrain it. As it says, since it is the intermediate level between the holiness where all life originates and the three impure klippas as mentioned above. So when it comes to the quality of this light, they're all equally concealed. However, when we're talking about the quantity of how much godly energy is invested, how much creative power is invested in each, that there is a vast difference. Afal Pikein, that's what Alter Rebbe continues to saying, that nevertheless, nevertheless, the godliness illuminate, the godly illumination, meaning the flow of vitality by which God illumines and gives life to all creatures of this world, by way of this garment, the klipas noiga, it is not the same for them all. And the difference between the life force and the various creatures, is in terms of contraction and expansion. In some creatures, the life force is constricted and limited, while in others, it finds broader expansions. That was the lesson of Shabbos of yesterday. So we continue the lesson of today, which is Sunday, the 24th of Adar, of second Adar. Continues the Alter Rebbe, Ki baguf agashmi v'adime mamish kavanim v'ofo, ha'orei b'chinas tzimtzum godel asher ein kamoyu. In the physical body of a living creature, and in the absolutely inanimate beings, such as stones or earth, in which no life or spirituality are apparent, since they lack even the power of growth. So in there, the ray of the divine creative power this is in a state of unparalleled contraction. The greatest contraction and limitation of the godly energy. We're talking about the quantity of how much godly energy there is in this world. So in the inanimate objects, obviously it has the least godly energy. So minute is the life force within these inanimate beings that they lack even the power of growth. So that's the lowest level. Then in vegetation, the ray is not so greatly contracted. The phenomenon of growth indicates the presence of something more than mere physical matter. Some degree of spirituality is in evidence. V'derech klal, and generally speaking, says the Alter Rebbe, in general, all things in this world are divided into the four categories: mineral, vegetable, animal, and man. Medaber means the speaker. That's in general. Obviously, when it comes in more in details, there's much, much more divisions. Inanimate objects, for example, there is rocks. There is all types of rocks. There is plain rocks that you don't see any quality of it. Then you have flintstones that have some fire inside. You have diamonds, you have crystals, you have all kinds of minerals in the inanimate objects. So obviously, that depends on the different types of energy that comes from Hashem to animate those inanimate objects. And the same thing is by vegetation, by animals, by humans. There's endless differences of the levels of godliness that is in each creature. But in general, they're divided to these four categories. And in those four categories, says the Alter Rebbe, they come from the four letters of the name of God, the Tetragrammaton, the name Yud, the Hey, the Vav, and the Hey. The Yud is the source of the humans. The first Hey is the source of the animals. The Vav is the source of the vegetations. And the last Hey is the source of the inanimate objects. Says the Alter Rebbe, is corresponding to the four letters of the divine name, the Tetragrammaton, from which they are derived. Each of these four categories receive its vitality from one of the four letters. Says the Alter Rebbe, "Ukemoi she'ein erech v'dimyon ההורה והמשוחס החייס שבדוימים וצמח, להורה והמשוחס החייס שמלובשת בחי ודבר." Now, just as the illumination and the flow of vitality found in the mineral and vegetable, in these categories, they bear no comparison or likeness to the illumination and flow and vitality clothed in the animal and man, since in the two latter categories, it is clearly apparent that they are alive. They have also the emotions, they have will, they have desires, they have that's why it puts them in these a separate category. Although in all four categories, the divine animating light is the same. What does it mean is the same? In terms of concealment of continents. Meaning that in all four categories, the inner aspect of the divine light is concealed equally. You see creatures. You don't see that those creatures are godly. They're concealed in all of them. In all four categories, the light is clothed in the same garment. In all of the four categories, the light is clothed in the same garment, namely the garment of the veil of Noiga. Hence, it says, in none of these categories is it apparent that their vitality is actually godliness. Yet, despite this equality, the vitality of inanimate beings and plants is incomparable to that of the animal and man. So now says the Alter Rebbe, this leads us to the conclusion that he brings the lesson we learn. What is the moral from this? That similarly we can learn the same thing when it comes to the mitzvahs. So the Alter Rebbe, kach ein erech v'dimyon klal. Bein ha'oras v'amshochas eir sof baruch hu shu pnimius r'tzoynoi izborech bli es teponim olavush klal. Similarly, there is no comparison or likeness between the illumination and flow of blessed Ein Sof light, meaning the inner aspect of his will, without concealment and countenance, and with no garment whatsoever. Ameira umelubeshes b'mitzvah ismaisia ismamish, וכן במצווה התלויות בדיבור וביטוי שפתיים בלי כוונה שהוא נחשב כמעשה ממש כנזכר להם. What the Alter Rebbe is going to say before we continue, again, what we said before, is that just like we said, there is these two levels. In the physical object, you have the concealment of godliness equally, and then you have the amount of godliness that is not equal, and each creature is different. The same thing says the Alter Rebbe here when it comes to mitzvahs. All of the mitzvahs and the kavanah of the mitzvahs are equally not concealed. They're equally revealed because this is the ultimate revelation of God's will. What does God want? Put on tefillin. It's God's will. You give tzedakah, you're doing God's will. Anything, any mitzvah that you do, it is an equal godly revelation. However, when it comes to the kavanah, intent of the mitzvah, that you invest how much of godly revelation there is in you, there is a difference between the action of the mitzvahs, which the revelation is limited to your action, or the kavanah of the mitzvah, which the revelation permeates also your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, and your intellect mainly. That's what Alter Rebbe says. So we'll continue inside. So again, similarly, there is no comparison or likeness between the illumination and flow of blessed Ein Sof light, and the meaning the inner aspect of his will without concealment or countenance and with no garments whatsoever. As it radiates and is clothed within the mitzvahs consisting of action. Mitzvahs ma'asiyos mamash. And similarly, mitzvahs atlis b'dibur b'tis v'sayim bli kavanah. Whether actual action or mitzvahs performed through speech and verbal articulation, which is regarded as actual action. As mentioned above, when performed without kavanah. When you do a mitzvah, the mitzvah that is done by speech, if you do it without kavanah, without intent, it is also merely action. It's the movement of the lips. So you cannot compare the light that is there. The illumination of the Ein Sof found in these mitzvahs bears no likeness or comparison with the superior illumination and flow of the blessed Ein Sof light, radiating and clothed in the kavanah of the mitzvahs of action. When you have the kavanah, so to speak, you have more quantity of godly revelation. When you So meaning, man's intention to attach himself to God by fulfilling his will, as expressed in the mitzvahs, since he and his will are one. So when you have this kavanah, when you do the mitzvah with the kavanah to connect to Hashem, thereby it brings the light more, a greater light that is connecting with you. Similarly, with regard to kavanah in prayer and the recital of the Shema and in the blessings and in other blessings, and the Shema and its blessings, the blessings of the Shema, and in other blessings, where through one's kavanah, through one's kavanah in them, he attaches his thought and intellect to God. So this is the end of today's shir, explaining this concept. And just like we have the body and the soul in the physical world, again, that equally they are both have, godliness is concealed equally in both. And in the same time, the quantity of light is different than in the different creatures, the different categories. The same thing, we're talking about the mitzvahs. You have equally, all the mitzvahs is equally, godliness is revealed equally, because this is the inner will of Hashem. But yet when it comes, there is a difference in the mitzvahs of action. When you do the action, you're bringing light only in the action. When you're doing the kavanah, it brings you a deeper and more revelation of the godliness. So this is the end of today's shir. Tomorrow, the Alter Rebbe is going to further explain this concept. Thank you for joining. Any questions we can take now?